Michael Hirschhorn, a producer, filmmaker, resistance activist, who wrote this week's New York Times essay, Voting for Mamdani Taught Me Why Trump Won, and what you call a kind of energy or magnetism that they share, not on ideology, but on politics. Explain.
Yeah, I think the idea that has been prevalent in the Democratic Party in particular is you kind of figure out what people believe through polling, through research, and then you kind of regurgitate it back at them. Mm-hmm. And what Mamdani's doing is similar, but also quite different. He's taking seemingly out there policies and ideas and putting them in really digestible form. And he's willing to have enemies. And Trump was willing to have enemies, because if you have enemies, you have people that are passionate about you. So he's very clearly picked a side. And that's the source of his power, right? He has 75,000 volunteers knocking on every door in the city for him. Mm-hmm. And Democrats don't generally have that. They haven't had that since Obama.
It's not even that new to observe that rhetoric is different than policy. They used to talk about campaigning in poetry and governing in prose. And yet Democrats and elites in all sorts of ways have been shocked by that with Trump. He is to be taken literally. We cover a lot of things he's really doing. But he's not really trying to take Canada and Greenland.
Not yet.
Well, okay. Well, he never built the wall.
Never built the wall.
So there are certainly things he doesn't do, and yet his voters hear it as he'd like to, he's not afraid. And with Mamdani, for a host of reasons, it's pretty hard to indefinitely freeze rent on 2 million people's homes. I mean, that's just how it works. And yet I don't know that, you tell me, all of his excited supporters, including young people, hear that as a fault if it doesn't fully happen.
I think what precedes policy is tribalism. Okay. And Mamdani has said, I'm on your team. And he said it convincingly enough and repeatedly enough that people are like, yeah, he's one of us. He may not do these specific policies, but he's going to fight for us. And that's precisely the connection that Trump has with the MAGA base. And I think the other kind of misnomer, there are two misnomers. One is that people really care about policy. Most people don't care about policy. They don't understand about policy. They want to feel an emotional connection to a candidate. And most Democrats are not putting that at the forefront. They're cautious, they're careful, they're tentative, they speak in a certain kind of politician speak. And that just doesn't work in this media environment.
You also touch on young men who've become this sort of disaffected group, and the internet, and as we say around here, yada, yada, yada. But Trump does 50% among young men, which is better than some candidates have done among young people. Republicans used to struggle with young people. Mamdani does 85% there, with a slightly just all the way up to 35. What do you see there? Well,
it's a misnomer, again, that I think young men are going right wing. I think young men are going anti-establishment. And if you think about like a Joe Rogan voted for Bernie Sanders before he voted for Donald Trump. Andrew Schultz voted for Bernie Sanders before he voted for Donald Trump. Another podcaster. And the numbers are shocking, right? It was this one poll did show 85% in the crosstabs, but then these other polls came out that showed men in general overwhelmingly voting for Mamdani, when men in general have been trending Republican. So there's some lesson there, and the lesson is if you can capture them emotionally, if you can capture, I think, a strong anti-establishment kind of F the system feeling and vibe a lot of young men have, because they feel disengaged from their personal prospects. They feel disengaged from, they're not going to support Chuck Schumer. And so somebody now has unlocked the vault. And everyone else should be paying attention to that.
Yeah, we had two Democrats on last night about the debate. One saying Schumer's time, at least his leader, should be up. The other standing by him. When you also broaden out at what you call the energy, is it just everyone's psychological issues in a media, digital saturated environment that's projected onto our politics? In other words, what do you say to someone who's reading you in the Times and going, oh, so is there any way to challenge that? The only way to do it is to kind of surrender on policy and just do a vibe check?
Well, I think the sense I have is that Mamdani has seriously thought about policy.
Okay.
And I think if you sort of poke at him and you scratch a little deeper, you do find some innovative thinking on some topics, less so on others. But I don't think you can run on that basis. I think the other thing that's really unique about this moment is this is a uniquely messed up time in our lifetimes. And most Democratic strategists ignore the fact that extraordinary things are happening in this country. Democracy is being dismantled piece by piece. And of course, some people are going to be angry. And if you can't engage with that anger, don't even bother showing up.